Hello, my name is Phil Jones. I'm a member of the Catholic Parish of Frenchs Forest. I'm also a member of the diocese, or part of the diocese of Broken Bay, and I'm the convener of a network of social justice groups in the diocese of Broken Bay known as SJ around the Bay. But I do want to make it clear that what I've got to say are my own views and do not represent those of anybody else. In this video, I want to raise the question for discussion. It's this: how should the Church in a country like Australia best respond to the social justice and environmental issues of our time? What is the most ideal way for parish communities to act effectively and make a real difference? That receives such an emphasis from the popes in recent years. In the Gospel of Luke, Jesus applies the words of Isaiah to himself, saying that the Lord has anointed him to bring good news to the poor, the Anoim. In today's world, we regard the Church as the visible expression of Christ, of God's love for humanity in our world. And in the compendium of the social doctrine of the Church, we read, "By means of her social doctrine, the Church takes on the task of proclaiming what the Lord has entrusted to her. She makes the message of the freedom and redemption wrought by Christ the gospel of the kingdom, present in human history. In proclaiming the gospel, the Church bears witness to humanity in the name of Christ, to his dignity and his vocation to the communion of persons. She teaches him the demands of justice and peace in conformity with divine wisdom." So that's it, by means of her social doctrine. Before answering the central question, I want to address some others. First of all, should the Church be involved in actions for justice and caring for our environment? Well, as long ago as 1971, the World Synod of Catholic Bishops pointed out that action on behalf of justice and participation in the transformation of the world fully appear to us as a constitutive dimension of the preaching of the gospel, or in other words, of the Church's mission for the redemption of the human race and its liberation from every oppressive situation. In the compendium of the social doctrine of the Church's social doctrine is not a privilege for her, or a digression, a convenience or interference. It is her right to proclaim the gospel in the context of society, to make the liberating word of the gospel resound in the complex worlds of production, labour, business, finance, trade, politics, law, culture, social communications, where men and women live. The second question is, what is social justice, and is it different from charity? Without discussing the different forms of social justice, sometimes mentioned, distributive, procedural and so on, I just want to answer this by saying charity is responding to an immediate cause, providing food for the hungry, setting up a medical centre for a village in Kenya or an orphanage in Nepal. Whereas action for social justice looks more at why is it that the people of Kenya or those of Nepal or anywhere else cannot ensure these elements in their society themselves so that they are able to live with appropriate human dignity. So it involves looking at the social, economic, the political and other systems or structures that contribute to the situation in which the poor or the powerless find themselves, and in dealing with those. Very often they are quite complex, difficult to change, and not particularly the fault of any individual. Yet they can be very significant contributors to a restriction on human dignity. In a similar way, Pope Francis in Evangelii Gaudium says, "The need to resolve the structural causes of poverty cannot be delayed, not only for the pragmatic reason of its urgency for the good order of society, but
because society needs to be cured of a sickness which is weakening and frustrating it, and which can only lead to new crises. Welfare projects which meet certain urgent needs should be considered merely temporary responses. So the need is to resolve the structural causes of poverty, and they cannot be delayed, he says.
So, is there a way that ordinary parishioners can effectively respond to these issues? Parishioners, first of all, need to know that a particular situation exists. They may not know that children trafficked into slave labour is used in parts of Africa to pick cocoa beans used for the making of the chocolate that they eat. They might not be aware that the jeans that they are wearing are made by teenage girls, paid a pittance, in crowded factories in Bangladesh. They may be unaware that tax avoidance and tax evasion cost developing countries billions of dollars every year, far, far more than the overseas aid that they receive. Or they may not understand that under certain provisions of free trade agreements, that an Australian mining company can sue the government of El Salvador for hundreds of millions of dollars because it refused to grant a mining licence likely to result in excessive environmental damage. They may never have heard of the villagers of Bulga in the New South Wales Hunter Valley, whose community life is severely threatened by the expansion of an open-cut mine. So parishioners need to be empowered with knowledge. Then they need to know how to respond. To say that these problems are too large and they can't do anything about them as an individual is to state the obvious. And again, one of the most self-defeating reactions is to feel guilty. Feeling guilty is often quite inappropriate. However, by linking up with other parishes, with other organisations, such as the Tax Justice Network, the Fair Trade Movement, the New South Wales Timor-Leste Justice Forum, Stop the Traffic. Some of these movements are local, others are national, others are international. They can do something. These organisations often have research capacity, they are in touch with experts in the field, and they can have representatives that go to Canberra or to Macquarie Street. The strength of these organisations as advocates comes from the support that they have within the community, and these movements have had real measures of success. There is a need for a parish structure to promote the awareness of these issues. I believe that it is possible for each parish to have a social justice group, a social justice committee, a Laudate Si group, or call it what you like. I'll call it an action group. But if a few people within a parish can be found who have an interest or who are motivated to act on an ongoing basis, that's all that's necessary. Members of this group can have their eyes and ears open for social justice and environmental issues that arise, perhaps through social media. They can come via individuals who subscribe to particular websites of organisations devoted to individual issues, or they could through a diocesan network of social justice groups or action groups. Now, when these organisations organise campaigns, that's when parish action groups can involve the wider parish community. For example, several years ago, Jubilee Australia, an ecumenical movement concerned with national debt of some of the poorest countries of the world, had a postcard campaign. Parishioners and politicians both gained an understanding of the issue as they read the postcard. The International Tax Justice Network had a similar campaign on tax avoidance and evasion. An invitation was extended for churchgoers to join the faith group section of the People's Climate March leading up to the Paris Summit on climate change. Other similar actions can be having a group of parishioners photographed holding signs related to a particular issue and sending that on to the appropriate political representatives. Of course, all of these activities don't preclude individual initiatives, such as signing an online petition or writing a letter to the local Member of Parliament. Nor does it mean that we don't change our individual lifestyles in response to an issue such as climate change. We can do our best to go by public transport or reduce our meat consumption and so on. So certainly we can respond as individuals. Some years ago, I attended a forum at which Bob McMullen spoke. He was the Parliamentary Secretary for International Development, in other words, overseas aid, and he was speaking to groups such as Caritas, World Vision, Oxfam and so on, and it was at a time when overseas development assistance was particularly low. He said something that I will never forget, and with this same kind of emphasis. He said, "You people have got the numbers, you're just not organised." He pointed out that if he went to Cabinet and said that he wanted more money for the overseas budget, for overseas aid, he needed to have evidence that there was community support, evidence coming from the electorate. He said, this was some years ago, he said that the last time there was a decrease in aid, he received not one letter. My point here is that we as a church need to be more organised when it comes to acting for social justice and supporting the poor. If we had an action group in just about every parish, and a group such as St Vincent de Paul was calling for a commitment from governments to increase funding for the homeless, or the Timor-Leste Justice Alliance was calling for more letters to go to federal MPs to have the border drawn between our two nations, our action groups would be able to pass this request onto their respective parish members. This could happen at a national level if we have a system of communication to all parishes. Being more organised requires communication, something I spoke about earlier. Often enough, this communication needs to be simultaneous. Our parishioners need to know that advocacy is needed. They need to have reliable information and fair-minded analysis of any complex social justice or environmental issue. How do we achieve that? In our network, that is Estuary and the Bay, we discuss the idea of a national monthly newsletter that could be circulated to all parishes willing to be on the mailing list. It could be a 2-page document that had very brief paragraphs on the issues of concern, with web links to sources able to provide more details. It could include an action section, an update or new good news section, and where appropriate a relevant quote from the Bible or Pope or our church leaders. It could be inserted into the parish bulletin and carried home by parishioners. Isn't that a waste of paper? Some might say in this digital age. Why not just have it on the parish website? Well, my bet is that it has a far greater chance of being read if it is in people's hands, rather than having to search for it somewhere in cyberspace. I would be confident that such a newsletter could be put together by a group of volunteers. Another point about having an action group in each parish, I believe it would be an important thing for our younger generation to be aware of. They come through our Catholic schools and possibly inspired to do good things for others. If they know that in every Catholic parish there is a group concerned about poverty, justice and the environment, a group that will support them in the type of Christian life that they want to lead, then it provides a means of strengthening their faith. They could feel that their local church is concerned and involved with the real world of all of their neighbours, both near and far. Finally, who is responsible for social action? Popes have made it very clear that action in the secular world is the responsibility of the laity, presumably with the encouragement and ongoing support of our priests. I think our priests have a role. They can allow a petition to be signed, postcards distributed. Perhaps they would allow the publication of the suggested national newsletter within their weekly parish bulletins. They could encourage people to attend film nights or forums organised by the parish social justice group. One last point. To proclaim the gospel is, first of all, to be a witness. Now, if we are disciples of Christ, if we are the salt of the earth and the light of the world, if we are the visible expression of Christ to the world, we should, I think, indicate our actions come from our Christian foundation. And where and if banners are appropriate, they should be used. So, to summarise my response to that first question that I raised, what is the most ideal way for parish communities to act effectively, to make a real difference? Firstly, have an action group, social justice group, a Laudate Si group in each parish. Secondly, ensure links with organisations that are working in social justice and environmental fields, that you know that you can trust and that are consistent with social value, with the church's, with gospel values and with the social doctrine of the church. Have information coming to parishioners, perhaps via a regular insert in the parish bulletin or from a parish-based or diocesan-based or national source. Where appropriate, have a visible sign of the concern for a particular issue, be it social or an environmental issue. How do we respond to these urgent issues? Something we need to discuss.